Welcome back to Two Homers and a Realist. This is a pod between the regular season and the bowl. Unfortunately, OU was not playing in the conference championship, but they are in the Cheez-It Bowl. I think we're all really excited about that. There's just, that's something. So we're going to play Florida State. We'll talk about that today. We got some portal and recruiting stuff to talk about, and otherwise we're just going to talk about the bowls and what's coming up and what to expect. I'm Steve.
I'm Connor.
Jay.
Lucas is not with us. We send out our best to Lucas. He is at an undisclosed location off-site doing some high-level research for us. So we send our best, and he sends his best for whatever that's worth. But otherwise, we'll get to trash him, and we're realist-free, guys.
It's going to be a happy pod.
This is going to be a pod full of righteous optimism and none of that self-loathing, pessimistic BS that he brings to the table each and every pod. He always holds us back, and now we're going to be able to really let loose because we're always way more subdued and pessimistic than we should be, and now this is the true realism.
Yeah, Two Homers and Jay sounds a little bit better anyways.
It's just got a ring to it.
Yeah, it flows nicely.
So the Cheez-It Bowl, I'm not going.
Nope.
No, I'm not. I don't.
Yeah.
I can't venture my way down to Orlando for that.
That's a long way to go, an expensive place to be to watch what, unfortunately,
Would we
is
go
going to
to
be
Dallas?
an uphill battle.
Yes.
Yes, we would.
Would we go to Houston?
Houston's a little tougher. It depends on the matchup. I think we'd try.
Would we go to Shreveport?
Shreveport also. It depends on weather too. We might make a game day or prior day decision on some of these.
There's some gambling to be done in Shreveport, so
There is. That's true.
you could
That's
maybe
true.
figure that one out.
It's just Houston and Shreveport are both just far enough that you can say you're going to do it and you can do it. You can stay at a cheap place and make it happen, but at the same time, it's still a chore and you're still talking a 3-day adventure. So I don't know. But none of those are our option. We got Orlando, and that's really, really far away. And the land of the mouse is expensive. OU's probably going to lose.
So is this what the equivalent of the Russell Athletic Bowl was back when we got our ass beat by Clemson?
Yes.
Yep,
Yes.
I think
Same,
so.
same bowl.
Same bowl. All right.
Probably same result.
Time to turn some tables. I don't think it'll be the same.
What
result.
happened after that game? Next year we went to the playoffs.
Playoffs.
So I think you can just bank on that. That's obvious. Well, we'll see. We'll talk more about it in a future pod or two. But the early prediction is this looks like an uphill battle. We got a lot of guys sitting out. But it's a chance for young players to play, so there's reasons to watch for that. We get all the practices in. That's a positive no matter what. I don't know. They're going to have some players that sit out. We don't know what motivations are going to really look like. They may not know what to prepare for if most of the guys they're going to see on film aren't going to be playing in that game. The highlight players are quite a few of them. And so who knows? We may surprise.
That's the thing too. Is last year and even the year before against Florida, Florida and Oregon respectively over the last 2 years had big name players sitting out, and it was almost as if we always knew there was going to be an excuse after the game as to we didn't have this certain guy playing, so you can't take it with a grain of salt that we lost. We don't really have that from our point of view outside of a couple of offensive linemen. So, I think and Eric Gray obviously not playing is going to be
Theo Weiss.
pretty significant. Yeah. But it is. I like being in the uphill battle more to have something to play for a little
Right.
bit, especially after
Low expectations.
Yeah, after a season that we just had, where anything positive is going to be a big positive in my opinion. So I think Venables is going to have this crew ready to go. I don't think it's going to be 2 years ago against Florida when Dan Mullins was sitting there saying, you can't expect a lot essentially from our team. I think it's going to be quite the opposite. So I think Venables is going to expect excellence, and I think we're going to have a team who's ready to go regardless of who's playing. But hopefully we do get to see a lot of those young guys in the bowl. So we'll see.
It'll be interesting to see how fired up, to the degree you can even perceive something like this, but how fired up we are versus Florida State and Florida State fans. Florida State fans potentially could be thick. I don't know. They've got to still venture pretty far from Tallahassee, although I'm sure there's a lot of Florida State fans in the Orlando area.
It's hard to get the the trailer homes on wheels and stuff like that from Tallahassee.
I
so.
remember when I went to the national championship against Florida State. Obviously, it's a very different atmosphere, a different reason to come to a game, but it was obviously 70+% Florida State fans.
Wow.
Now, regardless of how thick they are in Orlando, they've got different motivation and a lot of reason to hate us that we don't have to hate them, especially the old timers. So we've been beating them for decades, and they haven't been beating us.
Yeah, so we're 3-0 in our last 3, right?
Yeah, and I'm thinking further back than that. So we're 3-0 in the last 22 years.
Yep.
All of those, well, obviously one for the national title that was really, really epic, and then 2 of them that are pretty big matchups. But if you go back to the 1980s, we beat them back-to-back Orange Bowls.
Yep.
So
Yeah, they were like 7-1 all time.
I
or
think so,
something.
yeah. And one was when they were a women's college, and we actually were just playing soccer or something. I don't know, but they were actually a women's college for quite a long time. So I don't know. Not that it matters that much, but I'm sure they're a fan base who hates us, whereas we're a fan base who just looks at them as another team. They're not like our Miami, and we are kind of their Miami, what Miami is to us.
Florida State's a cool helmet to me.
It's a cool helmet.
about
It's a
all it
cool
is.
story. It's got history.
Yeah.
It's not a team that threatens.
It's Bobby Bowden.
And they hate our guts.
Yeah.
I'm sure they hate us. We've beaten them. That's how it works.
I would
They have a
expect
lot more motivation. This is a springboard type of bowl game for them. Their quarterback's really good. He's obviously coming back next year.
Second-year head coach.
Third.
Third, yeah.
This
Jimbo.
is
third.
Yeah.
It is his third.
Because
wow.
they had 2. Who was the guy that replaced Jimbo? He was there for 2 years, right? And then they fired him. Look that up. And then
Did Norvell not? This guy not come right after?
I don't think so. I think there was
One coach in between.
well, we're gonna look.
Well,
that
yeah,
up.
because you're right. Because this is year 5 for
With
Jimbo.
He's a black guy.
from Oregon,
Yeah.
Willie Taggart,
Willie
Taggart, yeah.
Willie
Yep.
Taggart.
I should have just boldly said it.
And he just
It's on the tip of
joined-
my tongue.
Dion's staff, I think.
Mike
Prob-
Norvell's been there since 2020.
Okay.
So, yep. This is
2021,
third
22.
season.
But anyways, they're a springboard. They're
Yeah.
looking forward to.
They
They haven't had a.
They had Odell Higgins.
Is it interim?
They haven't had this type of season in a while.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, they've got an opportunity here for sure, and they've got a lot of momentum to build on. But we'll see. We'll see what we bring to the table. I think in this, it's always been this way to a degree. Bowl records don't matter that much. When you look back at the history, OU's bowl record is not that great compared to other teams, but we've always played in games that were really tough.
Yeah.
And so when you compare us to like on percentage basis to an Oklahoma State or for some other programs, well, they just weren't in, even Notre Dame. They weren't in games that were as monumental and meaningful as what we were in. And so it's
and even
not
this
apples to
matchup,
apples.
we're punching uphill.
We're punching uphill for the first time in a long time now.
Since probably that,
But
outside of
historically,
playoff games, yeah.
we've punched at least equal, and so our bowl record hasn't been as good. But now, in this realm of football, we're almost back to where we were in the 50s, where bowls were just really a bonus thing. Now they're really just a bonus thing. You get to a bowl just to reward your players, give a reason to give them more gifts, and get the practices in. Whereas it used to be for a long time, a couple decades there, I think it really meant something
Really
to try and win the
honorable
bowl
type of
game.
thing.
And now it's like, let's just get to the game and let's see what happens. And obviously we want to build on things and see if we can capture some momentum. And yeah, it's great to have a win, but if you're not in the playoff, especially if you're a program like OU, it's just like, so what? Who cares?
Well, and think of how much time is normally spent right now by the coaching staff preparing for a bowl game that is now completely zapped, and all their energy is
true.
focused on recruiting and constant checking of the portal.
Because
and
you know what?
contacting of the portal.
You sandbagging son of a bitch, it's portal season.
That's right.
That's right, it's portal season, baby. So let's get right into that. You're right. That's a great point. We are deep and thick in the portal time, and that That's a great point, Jay. It's going to just absorb so much of their energy, and rightfully it should. You can only do so much in terms of actually practicing with the guys you've got on campus.
Well, yeah, because your portal right now is more important than your non-playoff bowl game.
It's more important. I would say it's more important than recruiting from the standpoint of you already solidified most of your recruiting class.
Correct.
You know, you've got a couple guys to add to it potentially, but for OU at least, now you're different if you're Oklahoma State, who's only got 12 commits, but with OU at 22 commits, you've got those. You want to keep them, and you want to add a few to it. But right now, priority one is figuring out what you want out of the portal, and I'm actually pretty optimistic. I was a little concerned going into it. I'm pretty optimistic about what I see with the rumors we're hearing about who's interested and who we're interested in. It tells me that the coaching staff has been putting some work in and working back channels to get some guys a little bit of communication to say, hey, there's an opportunity at Oklahoma for you if you're interested. And I think they're doing some research to find guys they want to find, not just go and grab anyone with any type of profile.
Yeah, there seems to be two types of teams dealing with the portal, and it'll probably be this way for a while. You have all the teams that are losing their best players, and then you have the elite teams or the upper tier teams that are processing players and stealing all of the players that were either under the radar or had breakout seasons or grew 3 inches. Late bloomers. So you've got the OUs, the Alabamas, the Georgias, everybody picking off Louisiana Tech's receiver that just came out of nowhere and had a 1,200-yard season, or Wyoming players, or I think New Hampshire has an offensive lineman that like every single team is offered. Like they want him bad.
That's
like
awesome.
He's an incredible offensive tackle.
So late bloomer.
How is he at New Hampshire?
Under the radar.
Right. So.
Wow.
Interesting stuff like that. But Oak State is losing all their key players. Oklahoma is losing players that either didn't stick around long enough to contribute or have been here for years and did not contribute. And we're
like
hopefully
you said,
just
processing
replacing
guys
them
out. Processing guys that aren't
with
a
known
good
commodities.
Fit, which is good. It's good for the player and it's good for the program. Now you look at
most of the players that we get are going to be a known commodity,
right?
To a certain degree.
Oh, yeah. We're not going to take a flyer on someone. Now, I think there's other coaching staffs that would. I could see Lincoln Riley taking a flyer on someone who was high profile, especially if they were highly recruited, and just because that's the kind of guy he is. He just wants the stars. I think that I'd like to think that Brent Venables and his group is a little more methodical about, let's see if this guy's a good fit for our program. You bring up Oklahoma State, I think that's interesting because they seem to be, we talked about it earlier at dinner, I think they seem to be pretty old school. And Mike Gundy seems very old school about it, where the game maybe has passed him by or is passing him by in a very rapid pace, where he's not engaged with what you have to do in this new element of the game to be competitive. And then you look at other programs that are very similarly situated, like Colorado, who just hired Dion, who looks like they're going to be very engaged and understand the way this world works now. And they're not a blue chip. They have no reason to actually attract anyone, but they're going to be very active and try to go get those guys. And so it's going to be an interesting lateral shift between those two types of programs, the guys who get it versus the guys who don't. And then at the same time, it's like a win and lose at the blue chip level. So you've got, if we're going to elevate A&M to a blue chip level, which I guess in a lot of ways right now they are, by the amount of money they're paying, by the expectations they have, by the profile they've got garnered, as well as the recruiting classes they've had, they are losing guys. They are bleeding guys out. It is really hilarious to see how much they're losing. And then you have other programs like you mentioned, Oklahoma, hopefully, definitely in Alabama, Georgia, who's just going to sit there and attract the right kind of players. They're losing their own, though, too. There's guys there that are figuring out they're not going to be able to compete right away, and they're looking for exits.
Yeah, the newest component of this is, for the longest time, the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Georgias of the world, they didn't really lose depth ever through the portal or transfers, even before there was a portal, just players,
regular transfers.
And in just recruiting in general, they were able to stack year after year they would convince one of the top players at the exact same position to come in year after year after year, and you're not going to play for 3 years, and that's okay. Those kids seem to be okay
Well, they were
with it.
stuck.
But now, I don't think that's going to be the case for them anymore. I don't know if it's just a generational thing or the kids.
Hey, it's the portal. It's the
That's just
portal opened this up.
opportunities. Yeah, you have opportunities now.
Yeah, but I also think the kids have just started to figure it out. Like,
That's probably
why
true.
am I going to go
Right.
sit for 3 years
Right.
doing nothing when I can go get legit money over here, still at a good school, and actually get to play football, which is what I want to do anyway.
It'll be interesting to see how that translates at the professional level, where are we going to start seeing a more collegiate type of play because you don't have these guys who are sitting, learning, developing within a depth chart to move their way up into this position that they've earned for 2+ years. Because, like you said, I think there is a monumental shift in, I do think there's guys out there who's just, hey, you're a guy, you have this given talent, and you're going to go be a guy, no matter where you were at, and you're going to start day one. But you do have guys who've come up through a system and have developed under certain coaches over time. And now it's, like you just said, if I'm going to sit for more than a year, why am I going to sit here when I can go there and play? And even though I can go there and play, am I going to be playing under a coach that can develop me the way this coach was going to develop me as a 2+ year guy that's been in the system and knows everything and can go and be a draft pick that's well beyond what I'm going to be if I go play right now? I don't know. It's interesting. I think you have to sacrifice something to get this immediate, fulfillment that a lot of these kids are looking for. And that's why these numbers that we're looking at, when we see the number of players entering the portal,
1,000 plus at
1,000
the
plus
FBS level.
At the FBS level, with how many in FBS? 4,000 ish.
13,000 players in FBS.
Yeah, so
that's right.
So I mean, it's just a staggering amount, but it's. I think the opportunities are there for these kids, but it will be interesting to see from a development perspective how that competitive maybe is detrimental to that.
Well, the statistics so far have bore out that 40% only make it to another roster.
Yeah, I think that's what.
So I mean, currently right now you've got 600 kids that just made a big mistake.
Now
but they can go back.
They can go back, and they probably will be
They
taken
can withdraw
back
their
in most
name.
cases.
But what you mentioned something a couple weeks ago on our pod
You
where
think that's what that statistic shows?
I think so.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, think about it.
You're not going to go to the portal and then just not play football.
We don't have rosters of 60 people, so they're going to take them back because they need the people on the roster.
But you brought up something. So, and I was talking to a couple buddies about this week. In college football, you were only obligated, from a university perspective, to honor the scholarship on a year-by-year basis, right?
Right.
You're not
Right.
obligated to honor it all 4 years.
Nope.
So when these players enter the portal, you have the opportunity to say, okay, if you enter the portal, I can strip you of your scholarship as well.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of a give and take there, for sure. I'm sure a lot of guys. I mean, it'd just be a rough reality check to find out that no one's interested in you, and resources are limited, so it's bound to happen. Even if you're actually kind of good or could be a contributor at some lateral university, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to make the match unless you actively go out and just kind of do the walk-on thing somewhere in a lot of cases, because they're not going to take a flyer on you.
Right.
They don't have time, or they don't care.
Unless
Unless they
how
have a
bridge do you
position they
burn?
need to fill.
I would
Yeah.
think just about every player from OU that went in the portal so far has to go to a lesser school.
Right.
Theo maybe goes to an equal school, maybe. But he wants to be the number one guy.
And it's going to be tough.
And we didn't have just the deepest receiving core here.
No.
Where is he going to go
Right.
comparable?
What would make him think that
and
he's
be the
going to
number one guy
step right in
somewhere?
and be the number one guy? Unless it's some weird situation where you got a great program that just lost their top 3 receivers because of graduation or early NFL draft.
But I think that's probably across the board with the blue chips that you were just speaking
For the blue
of,
chips, yeah.
Of if you
Although
were-
they could be lateral. if
It could be
I guess
lateral.
it depends. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think you're right. In most cases,
I
it
mean,
would
you look
be
at you look
lesser.
at the and this is again another arguable quote unquote blue chip, but the Lacey kid coming in for Notre Dame, right?
Mhm.
That's a relatively. I think OU is a step up in my mind, but if you look at a national basis, you'd probably say that most people would say that Notre Dame to OU is more than likely an equal move.
Equal,
Yeah, I think there's
So,
in that kind of tier. I think there's much more teams in that top tier that are more equal. You know
but
what I mean?
at most of the time, I think you're going to see, like you just said, Jay. I think most of the kids that are going to leave are going to end up at the Louisvilles. They're going to end up at schools like that. Those
Otherwise, it's really
middle-tier
rare.
Power Five, middle tier Power Five conference schools, or top tier American conference schools.
It's really rare to go from a Notre Dame to an Oklahoma and actually step on the field from day one
Yep.
in a starting role.
Yep.
Like, if you can start at Oklahoma, you can start at Notre Dame.
Yep.
Now, Oklahoma may be so down in talent that that's an exception, but that's the exception. Generally speaking, if you're trying to get a start, you're like, all right, I'm playing behind an All-American. I need to go somewhere else where I can try to compete for the job, not very rarely ever expect to step on the field and be the number one when you were the number two somewhere else.
Well, and look at,
unless
like-
you go to the lesser school.
Right, and look at like someone like LV Bunkley Shelton, who's coming from a middle of the tier, bottom tier Pac-12 school in Arizona State, sees the field a couple times for OU, and that probably speaks loudly. We need depth at that position. However, there's a reason you weren't at OU or a similar school in the first place. Type of commentary, and like you said, there's those exceptions that the kid from New Hampshire who just has a breakout year and was flying under everyone's radar. Now everyone wants him, and the next field he steps on is going to be for a big name school. But those are one of few.
And you're still just evaluating him, thinking that he can do that, right? Everyone's still
Exactly.
taking a
Not
flyer.
proven.
Right. It's like the By Job kid from CCS, who is a renowned recruit, but is sitting in Oklahoma playing two-way football, who is dominating for obvious reasons, right? So I mean, go put that kid up against the Jinxes and the Broken Arrows and the Tulsa Unions of the world. Let's see what he really
Which
is.
is probably an underappreciated thing when you got a guy that has had it easy. That when you look deeply into it, I'm trying to remember what I was reading recently about guys that have been through the difficult. When a guy's been through difficult situations, they tend to be a lot better. When they are guys that have had a really easy time, it's just like it's human nature.
Bray
You
Wa-
just
Bray
don't
Wa-
do
Bray
as
Walker.
good.
David Stone's a good example where he was, I don't remember what school he was playing for here,
Del City.
but then he chose to go to IMG,
IMG,
and the
yep.
reason he wanted to go to IMG was
To prove
I want
himself
to
out.
see if I can actually, if I'm
Yeah.
as good as I think I am.
which is just a phenomenal character right there.
Yeah.
Just the willingness to do that tells you a lot about a kid. Much less if he actually proves out on the field.
Well,
Unlike-
and that's what speaks loudly in hopeful terms for me with someone like a Jackson Arnold, who has been at the top level of
Right.
Texas
Yes.
high school
Right.
football,
Not-
and not Spencer Rattler, who's been playing in
Exactly.
this mid to low level Arizona football where he's looking dominant.
Or
Jackson,
a kid that is really highly recruited that's going to be going to Texas.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Even a better point with Arch Manning. So I mean,
Who refuses to
bodes
do
well.
camps to compete with other elite quarterbacks.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's a lot of bright spots in it. It's such a weird, you go back 5 years even. I mean, I remember when Justin Brown came over from Penn State as a grad transfer, and we barely saw him on the field, but it was such a big deal. Or a DGB from Missouri who never got on the field, but it was a big deal that he transferred over. Now it's just like we take
Second
it with a
nature.
grain of salt.
What's
And-
interesting is teams like Oklahoma State, and I'm around a lot of Oklahoma State fans who are just beside themselves this week with all the people they're losing. They don't understand. They think this is ruining college football. They don't understand. They're the ones who could potentially benefit a lot from it if they could take advantage of it.
Right.
Because you got these guys who are behind someone at Oklahoma or other schools who immediately step on the field and are a great contributor at Oklahoma State. And no doubt about it. If you're not going to be part of this process, you're going to be part of the problem, and you're going to make it look like the whole world has been an earthquake below your feet. If you're Colorado right now, it looks like they're going to be the beneficiary of what is tremendous opportunity to be able to excel really quickly and compete at least at a conference level pretty quickly. I mean, it's a weak conference, but they definitely have a chance to compete within that conference pretty quickly when, enough games to give themselves a pretty good chance, maybe right away next year, into the conference title game.
Yep, and it's funny. Going back to Oklahoma State, is Mike Gundy has the back end of the equation figured out.
Mm-hmm.
He has the development aspect. He has you give me a 3-star player, and I'm going to go make him good, and I'm going to go develop him.
He motivates.
He motivates, and he gets people where they need to be to go be a competitive team. But like you just said, I think he's going to be quickly surpassed by the fact that he is unwilling to go and invest time and effort into making the transfer portal something that his team would be a massive beneficiary of.
Absolutely.
They'd be a top team every year if he would just sit there and say, I will take your sloppy seconds.
Yeah.
I will take the kids that were your 2s and 3s that got on the field sometimes but are mad about the amount of playing time that they got.
Well, it's part of the same story they've always used to motivate kids when they get them there is Oklahoma wasn't good enough for you. They didn't recruit you. Well, this is even better because, or it's equal.
They did
to
recruit
say
you,
they did
didn't
recruit
play
you.
you.
They wouldn't play you, and now you're going to come in. You're going to get a chance to beat them. Let's
Yeah,
get on
you
the
get to
field and
play
let's go
them.
play them
Yeah.
and beat them.
Yep.
Like
and
Jordan
he's missing
Muse,
an opportunity
right?
here.
Yep.
So it's interesting. I think those schools are really in the lurch, and even more so where we're evolving in college football. This is getting into what I think would be a great offseason topic, but when you look at the changing landscape of college football, who's in, who's out, it's a big league of 131 teams or something. That's just too many. And so are you in that top 64? Are you in that upper echelon? Are you going to make those what is looking like the top conferences? Who knows? In a couple of years, maybe 2 top conferences and everybody else is an also-ran. Yep. Where are you going to be in that mix? And if you're a school who isn't going to get serious about competing the way that you have to compete today, you may not have an opportunity to ever compete at this level.
You're just going to be a feeder school.
You get a feeder school, you're relegated to a lower league.
And that would be really frustrating for coaches too, because if you do have a good eye for talent, right, and you can recognize someone that's getting overlooked, and you get them to come to your school and you coach them up, and all of a sudden they're second team all conference, and then wait
leaving.
a second, you did too good.
But if you get enough of those guys, you could be okay.
I think they're all
what you're
going
trying
to be poached.
to do.
My point is, I think those players are going to get poached.
At some point,
but
though,
they will get poached. But if you get enough of those players, that's okay.
And at some point, we are not talking about the intangible, which at OU is going to be a big thing, at least for the next couple of years. There is something to be said for a culture at a school as well.
Right.
And there is something to be said for, I do take those guys. I do make the 3 stars, the second team, occasionally the first team all-conference players, and we make a Fiesta Bowl or a bowl of any kind at that point. There is something to be said for instilling that mindset, instilling within the players. You're not always the underdog. Sometimes we are the dog, and we are the team to get beat or to beat. And I just don't think. I think Mike Gundy's time of using that playing card is finally running up.
I think those coaches are kind of in, I call BS on, because they're either good enough they should be at another level,
right,
or they should get that program to another level, or they're just trying to capitalize on missed opportunities and have enough success that they look good and they're competitive enough, but they're actually not that good.
But that's a better point that you just made. Is I think those coaches are few and far between.
Yes.
OSU is a very, very niche school,
right,
where they're not losing that coach.
Right.
Anywhere else, that coach is OSU is a stepping stone school. Let's all be honest with each other.
And almost always will be.
It always will be. And once Mike Gundy leaves, that's
It'll
all
go right
it's
back
going
to
be.
yeah.
Because any other coach in his position takes the Tennessee job a couple years ago.
Right.
Or does something else. Mike Gundy's he's a program guy.
And they got lucky with the Boone Pickens money that they had enough money to retain even him.
It was
might not happen in the future.
timing.
They're in a really weird spot. Now, they may be in a better spot relatively in a couple of years when OU's not in the conference and Texas is not in the conference. But if I were going to look at it from an investment standpoint of who am I buying, who am I selling in the Big 12, I don't know if I'm buying Oklahoma State
Not
versus
after
some
what
of
we've
these other
seen over the last
programs.
2 weeks.
Not when I look
mean,
at TCU and Baylor and what we got going on down there, even Texas Tech and Kansas State.
McGuire, yeah.
Not to mention Cincinnati coming in and
I mean, Lance
UCF.
Leipold just signed an extension at Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and a successful school who beat Oklahoma State this year, and is clearly on some sort of path to a decent position
in a bigger market than what Oklahoma State's in.
Yep. So I mean,
So
it's
it doesn't look real good for the in-state rival.
No, I mean I don't know how long a school like Oklahoma State can afford to miss the boat either, because with how many players you have leaving, how small your class is coming in, that's like, this is it. Like, if you
it starts to unwind quickly.
yeah.
and
a
if
ba-
your
a
season
bad
And all of a
next
sudden
year-
you're Kansas.
and your season
Fast.
next year is, if it's not any good,
And you know what the fan support's like.
it is, you are in trouble
They're
quickly.
they're like every other fan base, only smaller. And so they've got tepid support from a group of people who are going to come and go, and then you got another group of people who are always going to be loyal, but they're more loyal to the party in the parking lot than they are to what's going on the football field.
Yep.
And they're not going to show up and expect as much. They may bitch and moan, and they may want to change, but all they'll want is a constant change. So it could unravel really fast for a school like that.
And you don't have a Boone Pickens who's alive anymore.
You don't, and you don't
to
have a
keep
deep
that
enough
stuff
group
solidified.
to call back on. I mean, we talk about the headwinds that OU potentially faces if they don't get their act together, and hopefully they're on the right track. My God, it's
Exponentially worse.
It's so much worse.
And we're worried. We're worried with that, with getting players from the portal even this past year that were seasoned players, right? They could come in and help you with your depth. And we had a top 10 recruiting class, top 12 recruiting
Yeah,
class.
that's true.
And we were still worried, and we're still worried this
And rightfully
year.
we're worried.
And we have
With
a
the
top
top
5
five.
recruiting
Yeah.
class.
Exactly.
And we're
Well, let's
worried
talk
the
about that.
portal.
We got a top 5 recruiting class. We got this portal group coming in.
Okay, so the people that don't know who all's in the portal, we'll just run down real quick.
Yeah.
Jordan Mukes, Theo Weiss, Joshua Eaton, Kendall Dennis, Alton Tarver, Ralph Rucker, Nick Evers, Bryson Washington, Bray Walker, Clayton Smith, Brian Darby, Cedric Roberts, Trey West, and Josh Ellison so far is in the portal. We have one portal guy coming in, Jacob Lacey, like Connor mentioned.
For sure coming in.
From Notre Dame.
Committed. Yep.
We've got 4 guys going to the NFL draft, and then we have Trey Morrison, Braden Willis, C.J. Colden, Daniel Parker, Deshaun White, Justin Broyles, Michael Turk, Casey Kelleher, Chris Murray, Robert Congle, and Jeffrey Johnson, who have no more eligibility after the bowl game.
No more for sure with Braden Willis and those guys, even with the COVID.
Correct.
So there, but I mean, although it's a longer shot, you could say NFL draft for them too. So I think what you're up against there is probably, which speaks to the lack of talent, a below average amount of going to the NFL. An average amount of
Departure.
departure, graduating out.
Right.
Graduating out.
And very much losing more potential and depth than you're losing experience and production in terms of guys that are transferring away.
Yeah, the transfer portal it's Theo Weiss and nobody else.
And
It's
potential.
potential,
And what could have happened. Yeah, not production for
Right.
sure. So that's a pretty rosy picture. From what we hear in the rumors, it's quite a few guys of high caliber that could be coming in right away. We would expect, I mean, let's make a prediction. How many guys do you think we're going to land in the portal that were going to be eye-popping names? I would say it's probably going to be 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, I was gonna say over under probably around 5.5 to 6.
Yeah,
I mean,
of
names-
eye-popping names, so much
names-
less the other guys.
I would
you
say
get.
names that
Are gonna
a
matter.
general fan would know.
Oh, well, I don't know about a
Probably
general
not
fan.
many, but
No.
but bigger fans of the game. It'd
yeah.
be 4, 5, 6
I mean, I'm
guys,
a
right?
big fan of college football. I didn't know the Clemson safety who potentially could commit.
It's
and
true.
It
decommit
sounds like
commit.
he's
So,
potentially coming
it sounds-
over, and that'd be a big get.
So what's the chance? I mean, we saw it last year with Caleb. Obviously, that's a big call out, and it's a completely different circumstance, obviously. But
Is he the biggest transfer so far of all time?
yes,
Hurts-
in this era.
Hurts was up there.
But he was that
Caleb
in the
Williams-
immediate transfer era? It was.
But
Or he was a graduate.
He's a grad
He was a
transfer.
grad transfer.
Transfer portal.
From
Caleb
transfer
Williams
portal?
is the
Yeah.
biggest
Yeah.
name, and
Yeah.
it probably will be the biggest name. He's going to win the Heisman.
Yeah, who
So
you would almost outside of a guy doing what he did, which is follow his coach. You're never going to see a guy leave a program who's that.
yeah, that's like
level.
Adrian Peterson
You're right.
esque type of lead.
Yeah, that you're giving way too much credit to that.
I don't know. I mean,
Adrian Peterson is a lot better.
I'm not.
Than
I'm
Caleb
not saying
Williams.
he's not better. I'm saying in terms of team impact and what he can do to win a football game, Caleb Williams. If you put Caleb Williams on
Probably
this team,
so.
we probably lose one, maybe 2 games.
Now, some of that's the fact that he's a quarterback.
Like-
I'm not
Exactly.
gonna.
Yeah,
I'm,
yeah,
I'm gonna
exactly.
tell you right now. If you told me right now you have to start a team tomorrow, do you want Adrian Peterson or Caleb Williams? I'm gonna say Caleb Williams. Just because of the
that might-
position.
Yeah,
It's just
I don't
so
know.
You're looking at
important.
two. Man, so
You're trying
fair
to
enough.
find. You're trying to compete against the substitute. That's probably true.
It's like taking.
Adrian,
it's like-
Caleb-
Adrian Peterson following Lincoln Riley to USC. They are not 10-2 with Adrian Peterson.
Well, yeah, but he's not a quarterback.
Exactly.
But so fair enough. Maybe
Yeah.
it's an unfair comparison in that
I
aspect.
think it's an unfair comparison.
Maybe-
I
maybe
would
you
say
say
Kyler after his
exactly. That's
season
what I was gonna say. You say
would be
Kyler
like
after
no.
18.
I think Kyler. No. I'm saying Kyler is like Adrian Peterson. I think Caleb has been great this year. I will totally admit that, and he has exceeded the potential of or the risk of what he was going to be because we didn't know. But at the same time, he just wasn't that good at OU for his 6.5 games that he played.
I wish we had the.
compared to
Well,
what
he
he's
was a
been
true-
at,
was a
at
true
USC.
freshman.
I wish we had
Yeah,
the.
no doubt about it.
The WAR, like the baseball stat, the wins above replacement stat, for that because
Yeah,
I think it'd be pretty
it
drastic.
just depends on what the replacement would be.
True.
but, yeah,
You'd have to gauge that.
that's tough.
But I think it's.
No, I think he's phenomenal. I think he's a big
I think
impact.
I don't think there will be a splash like that for a long time.
No, I don't
to come.
either. I don't think so
And
either.
it would have to be, and it was a very specific circumstance. That
yeah.
happened. And I don't know.
So
if
we're
you see-
totally in agreement.
Yeah,
on
I don't
that.
think. Yeah, exactly. I don't think you see a circumstance like you saw
No.
with OU at the end of last season in a long time.
No.
A blue chip.
Oh, well, you never hear
program
of that.
exactly like
You
that.
never hear of that.
And it would happen to us as
Right,
a program. Like
right.
it would happen to us.
We're on another tier as compared to the other example that comes to mind as compared to Florida State and Texas A&M and Jimbo going. We're on a different tier than those two programs. We are
100%.
higher up than those
Absolutely.
two programs, and it's a bigger deal when we lost Lincoln.
And we were on a
than they
much
lost Jimbo.
different trajectory than what those programs have been.
Which of the two programs gained more by losing, OU or Florida State?
gained more by losing? Oh, by losing.
By losing the coach.
Oh, OU's gained
I think so too.
an astronomically more. I think sound. I think. I think
What?
for
Not, don't look at who they replaced
No,
him
no, no.
with.
I think for don't look at who
Just who
replaced
they
it with.
lost in the position they're in. I mean, maybe it's hard to separate the two.
No, Jimbo was a flash in the pan.
I think so too. I think
Well, and they were going
Lincoln's a
down.
better coach than Jimbo.
But I
I
mean, they were going
100%
down.
think so.
Jimbo
Yeah,
had peaked and already started
Yeah.
to crash Florida State, and he did.
Yeah.
He sunk Florida State, which
Mhm.
is part of the reason he left. Is his Winston was really all that
it was
Jimbo
it.
had.
He had one player, whereas Lincoln had like 3 or 4.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Who consistently won them.
no,
And
it's Caleb's
Jimbo's-
a crazy phenomenon.
Problem at A&M has been the same thing. He's considered this quarterback guru,
That
and he
hasn't had a
can't
quarterback.
get any quarterbacks
Yeah,
and coach any of them up.
Kellen Mond was a joke and got way too much credit for a very, very subpar product, in my opinion. So,
Well-
what question real quick before we move on? We talked about transfer portal, talked about who's in it, who's kind of moving along. What do we think? And that's kind of how I got on the topic because we saw it with Caleb last year. What do we think we see? Do we see a lot of guys who declare after the bowl game, after we see them get time on the field, or not time on the field, or you think Venables is trying to have all those conversations beforehand?
Do you mean
to get-
OU specifically?
OU specifically.
I think
yeah.
I think he tried to do it now.
Yeah, I think
I
I
think
would
he
be
probably-
sho-
I think he probably
shocked
told the players,
if we have
too.
too many players after the bowl game.
I think he probably told them too. You also need to give yourself more time in the portal to give yourself
Yep.
more opportunities.
So you think if we see a
Number
Jaden
one-
Gibson in the bowl game, we probably see a Jaden Gibson sticking around afterwards?
I'd say that's likely.
Yeah.
There's a couple guys I'm sure.
On
Yeah,
the
there's a
fence.
couple.
There's 4 or 5 guys for sure on the fence in that position who think they should be getting playing time. If they don't in the bowl game, or they may look at the bowl game as an opportunity to showcase themselves. But otherwise, I think I'd be pretty shocked if it's more than 4 or 5, maybe even if it's that many, that declare for the portal after the bowl game.
Yep.
Just like I would be shocked if we, I don't know, lose anybody from our recruiting class at this point. If you're in the recruiting class now, you're in. I don't think
2
we're going to
weeks.
get a flip. I don't think anybody's going to flip.
Yeah,
on
I
us at
think
this point.
after the Anthony Evans flip,
Well, most of these kids' high school seasons are over too.
Right.
So
There's no reason for him to flip. There's just,
And you gotta hope you
especially the way
see-
Brent Venables has, and to his credit in his style, has developed this relationship of you're committing to OU. You're not just saying you're going to come to OU. It's a true commitment. I feel like he's going to see eye to eye with that player and build a connection with them that would be more surprising. Whereas I think Lincoln, he was trying to just get guys to say they were going to come.
No, that's a good point.
He thought they were going to come, and he got flipped on several
Well,
times
that's-
in
so how many-
high-profile positions.
we lost a lot of.
how many
late flips.
decommitments have we had since? So obviously Anthony Evans is the big name.
A couple max.
Yeah,
Hicks.
not very many.
2 or
right?
3. I can't even honestly
Yeah.
remember too many.
Yep.
And-
Hicks
and
wasn't
they came
officially a
early,
commitment.
right, and he wasn't official.
supposed to
The
be.
That's
defensive
right,
End, the
that's
defensive
right.
end from Austin.
Vasic. Yeah, and that was
yeah.
that was
And
all
that
set
was-
up with OU getting their ass beat in Dallas,
and him being
and
from
his dad
Austin.
also being a legacy Texas player.
That's
so.
a tough uphill battle there.
Yeah.
So no, and not as bad. Now we'll see. Now we haven't gotten to signing day yet, but I'll be surprised if we see any of that stuff happen. And let's give it over the next 5 years. I'll be surprised because I think Brent Venables is going to, with pluses and minuses behind that strategy, he's going to develop relationships with kids that are going to say, you're going to come commit to OU, and we're not going to commit to you until you commit to us, and it's a true commitment. Whereas in the past, in other regimes, other strategies, it's more of, I would love for you to come to this school. Why don't you say you're going to come here, and I'll say you're going to come here, and we'll see where things go. It's just a different style.
Yeah, and you could see something like that with a Jaren Kanak, where you know, he's committed to the man, but he's committed to the philosophy that Venables is preaching as well. So
Speaking about the portal, and maybe one last point along those lines, dovetailing with that, would be how many guys are at Clemson who didn't sign up for this and did sign up for playing under Brent Venables and want to come and see the rest of their career under this guy who can put them potentially into the NFL. I think there's probably several guys who want to do that.
I actually think it would be really surprising to have nobody come follow BV. Honestly,
Right.
yeah, it'd be
would be
kind
kinda
of
strange.
it'd be disappointing,
Especially if they're
maybe?
not. It'd be different if they're starting and burden the hand versus come out and compete. So I understand if you're a starter at Clemson, you're in the ACC where it's an easier league to excel in. But if you're in second team, yeah, that's pretty shocking that you don't have somebody that's trying to come out and follow him. So I would expect some of those happen.
And you gave Dabo the 1 year
2,
grace
3.
period, of
Right.
Not
Oh, that's
robbing,
got to be over with.
of
And
not,
you're,
of not robbing his
Brent
roster.
did, yes.
Yeah,
Brent did,
did.
and those players
And-
gave him a one-time chance to earn
To
the
say,
starting
yeah,
job.
here's
and
what I
like,
wanna do.
I'm
Well,
not there.
Well, I wonder how many kids last year, right, that maybe
Wanted to.
want to follow BV to Oklahoma, and he was like,
Yeah,
"No, you
yeah.
can't." I wonder how their years went
Yeah.
at Clemson.
And truth serum in him, I wonder how many now Brent would change his mind on or wish something would have been different, seeing the way the season played out, because
Oh, there's no question that Brent
he didn't see this coming.
I don't know if he just had more confidence in himself or what, but that whole I'm not taking whatever Clemson high school recruits that
He'd be backtracking that
yeah,
pretty quickly.
instantly.
Right. I agree. And at
Maybe
this,
I don't know, maybe not, because how many really would have played
but
this year?
but at this point, there's I know that coaches try to maintain a code, at least the ones with respect within them. But at this point, with the cutthroat that is NCAA football, there's no room for mercy.
Well, you got to be careful, and you can be merciful and give a
You
lot
can
of
be
grace.
friends, but
and
at some point, you
You gotta keep your
say-
job.
Yeah, you got to say, I came here to do a job,
There's
and
no.
this is what it's going to take to do that.
If all
Maybe
10
I'm backtracking
starters
my
from-
Lincoln Riley take, though. I don't know.
If all 10 starters from Clemson wanted to transfer to OU, BB would have to be like, I'm sorry, Dabo.
And that's okay, and that's exactly what
I
USC
gotta
fans are
take
saying,
'em.
right?
Right.
That's exactly what USC fans are saying with Lincoln and Caleb and Lincoln.
No,
and,
and I
Lincoln and
honestly-
Caleb. That's it, because Latrell McCutcheon isn't
Yeah, but that was
doing
the
it.
coach.
And
That was
and
the
Mario
coach.
Williams.
That
Yeah,
was the
Mario.
coach leaving, though, and
Yeah,
bringing
yeah.
them with them.
right.
This
a little
is a whole,
different
this,
than
is-
it's a different situation.
It's not like Dabo came to OU,
Right.
And then Clemson players are coming.
right.
I mean, DC left, but now a year removed, if that entire defense wanted to come to Norman, Oklahoma, you got to do what you got to do.
So I don't hold it against Caleb for transferring, other than it frustrates me. It does frustrate me that he took as long as he took, and it seems like he was trying to
Pissed me off. He played the
hold
ball.
out for his. He played the ball. Things could have been better. We probably could have gotten a better. We could have figured out who we wanted earlier, and I think we were beggars and choosers when it came to Dylan Gabriel. He's going to win the Heisman. That's my Heisman prediction. I don't think I'm going out on a limb there. The betting markets seem to be pretty rock solid there. I'm going to actually win money since I bet on Caleb to win the Heisman back when he was an OU player in this season. And so at least I'll get a little something out of that. I would love to see him not win it in a sense, just because I'm a little spiteful. But I do think he's probably as deserving as anyone to win the Heisman. One question I'd like to ask is, if he stays at OU, is he in New York, and does he win the Heisman?
Ooh.
I think he can easily be in New York.
I think so too.
He's-
I think
I
he almost
definitely
certainly
think
is
he's
in New York.
I definitely think he's in New York.
I think he has a good chance of winning the Heisman.
If he
Because-
stays at OU under Levy,
Yeah. So we're 3 games within 1 score of winning. So right away, does Caleb Williams
4.
put it? You're right, 4. Does Caleb Williams give us the edge in those
Yes.
games? Probably.
absolutely.
We've seen TCU. TCU's beatable. We could have won that game. Texas throw. I don't care that it's 49-0.
Me neither.
That's a meaningless score.
Meaningless.
We absolutely could beat Texas
Yeah.
this year. We absolutely are a team that could have beaten Texas this year. We could now. So if we're undefeated, he's winning the Heisman. If we lose 2 games, I think he's probably winning the Heisman.
I would bet my house that we were a 10-win team minimum
with Caleb.
with Caleb Williams.
I don't know if we're not playing. We were playing in a much better league than Pac-12, in my opinion. I don't think our defense, despite playing, I think our defense is probably around the same as what USC's is, despite the difference in turnover margin and everything else. I think USC was a very mediocre defense based on what we saw, playing in a much.
I actually think we're a little bit better.
I think so too, and I playing in a much lesser league.
Yeah.
USC.
No, I think we're
was.
better.
I don't think we have the. I don't know if Caleb gets the ball as much as what he got it in.
Well, you look at the
California.
stats.
You mean
Dylan-
possession-wise?
Possession-wise, I don't think he has the ball in his hand as much to maybe produce the stats that he does.
I don't know. Dylan produced pretty similar stats.
Yeah.
And I think Caleb pulls off some things that Dylan couldn't have pulled off, and including
It's just
the
so
run.
hard for me
Well, he
to
definitely
put this
pulls
team in
off
a
more
different
first
light.
downs. I tell you that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
more,
runs
and
for
more passes over the middle.
He runs for significantly more first downs on third. and
Right.
shorts.
No, I think that he's in a similar position to where he is
Yeah.
now. I understand his position, and I'm saying this based on a little bit of Homeristic faith, as well as obviously it's just hypothetical versus what we've seen and what he's actually done. And he was following a guy who he already had followed once and believed in, and has a track record, if you will, of producing good output for a player just like Caleb. So I understand why he did what he did, and it's a bit of a stretch to hypothetically assume he could produce the same thing under Lebby in Oklahoma, but I think he probably would have. I think it would have been pretty similar.
I think Stroud wins if he's here. I don't think we have the the cast of receivers either.
Well, I think a safe bet would be it'd be a very close match.
Yeah,
It
for
wouldn't
sure.
be running away.
I definitely
with it.
think he's in New York. I just don't know if he wins the Heisman.
No, yeah, I think it's
I
up
think
for
it's
grabs.
more- of a
But,
toss-up.
but I think
Fair.
I think some of why he's going to win the Heisman too is because where USC was,
Right.
and you bring in a quarterback and
Yeah,
a coach, and now you were.
Well, and look at
now
the
you're at
market
where
over
we're
there
at.
too. Look at the people who
So
are voting
if
for the Heisman.
if OU
Right.
goes from last year being a 10-win team with
To a 10-win team,
Caleb Williams and another 10-win team with Caleb Williams,
not as big a
Yeah.
splash.
Not as fun to
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about.
Very good point. Very good point. But no, it's just interesting hypotheticals to look at, and it speaks to kind of the position that both of those two, Lincoln and Caleb, put us in by making those changes. It is interesting. We talked about at dinner that if you look back at the track record of Lincoln Riley and the success he's had have been guys that, aside from recruiting, if you will, Jalen Hurts to come play for him, he landed two guys in his
Fell
lap
in
that
his
he
lap.
did not recruit.
Yep.
Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. And the guys he recruited don't look that good. You got Spencer Rattler, you got Brock Vandergrift, you've got Austin Kendall, and now
Incoming Malachi Nelson.
Malachi Nelson. And so it's going to be interesting to see, because Caleb Williams is a guy who came in as an afterthought, who really, almost like Baker, followed instead of the program, the coach, and said, I want to go play for that coach, and said, hey, look at me, I want to play for you. Happened to be a 5-star guy, and it was easy to say yes, or it was easy for Lincoln to say yes because he's so enamored by the 5 stars, I believe. But it is interesting, and we'll look back at his career at some point and say, did Lincoln Riley really know what it took to have great quarterbacks? Or was he just kind of stumbling around in the dark, and some guys landed in his lap, and he also had some creative coaching and some creative calls, great offensive coordinator calls, no doubt about it, that helped a guy produce a lot of production, and maybe just wasn't actually that great, including with development.
So for those that don't quite know, so Brock Vandegrift was Lincoln's first choice
In
for
the
quarterback in the
2021 class.
2021 class.
21
2020 class to
2020
to
class,
play
2021. Yeah. And a month or two went by, and Vandegrift decommitted and went to Georgia.
Another loss for us in terms
And-
of a flip.
And then we got in on Caleb Williams late. Not that Caleb Williams wasn't on Lincoln's radar, but of the two, he wanted Brock instead of Caleb Williams, or more than he wanted Caleb Williams. And so he kind of, he still had to recruit him. He still had to convince the kid to come here, and you had to have done something for him to even be giving you a look. So I don't want to take that away from Lincoln, but of the two, the better of the two, in a way, fell into his lap.
So Lincoln Riley is a mediocre quarterback away from being Texas A&M, in my opinion. He's going to have the
He's
Jimbo.
us not getting
he has
Caleb
the Jimbo,
Williams.
He has the Jimbo Fisher effect, whereas Jimbo can't find a quarterback to take his team to the next level. Lincoln Riley can't find anyone outside of the quarterback to make him outside of some skill players.
Look at what he
but
did.
a defense.
Remember that stat about how many guys were All-Americans that he recruited was like one. It was it CeeDee Lamb? Is he
CD.
the only one?
CD.
And there's nobody else that he recruited, and
Right.
nobody. In fact, yeah. What was it?
As
Did
a
he-
head coach, I don't know if he had
any.
He didn't
yeah,
have
as
any.
a head coach, he didn't have any. And so, yeah, you look at all the great receivers, all that great line, and everything. I mean, you look at how many running backs that we ran through,
Right.
and guys that we missed on. It's
Yeah.
not a great track record.
It's not.
Not to mention the defense, which if you're head coach, you're responsible for defense too. So I don't know. It's going to be real interesting to see what the rest of that career looks like. And the reason I think it's important to come back to it is it's where we were for 6 years. It has really shaped and molded where we are today. The season we just experienced and the seasons we're going to experience in the future, if nothing else in contrast, eventually we get that put behind us. One of the points that I wanted to make about the portal and losing guys, and I don't mean to be, and I'll speak about this just generally, so not to mention anyone in particular, but there's a degree of healthiness of getting rid of and purging toxic people from your roster. And you can be toxic in the locker room actively. You can be passively, unconsciously toxic. You can just be lazy. And the Lincoln Riley era guys, getting rid of them, it's addition by subtraction, potentially, in getting rid of a lot of these guys. And now we are, and Jay, you were saying earlier how many guys we're churning through, upwards of 40 people in 2 seasons in a row. We're almost done with the Lincoln Riley era in terms of players, and that can be a really healthy thing for how many guys we're getting rid of. We see it on defense, if nothing else, that the fact that these guys were uncoached for so many years or badly coached, that it's just good to start fresh.
Yep.
And get new guys that know this system. Something I was reading the other day and appreciating how the evolution of college football, of which Lincoln Riley is a part of bringing this about, the need on defense to have a 3-man front that's dominant. And now that you see that and understanding that's what Brent Venables wants to run, I think that's really important that we figure out a way to make that effective, have the talent that we need to pull that off, and then have a surrounding cast in the rest of the defensive backfield and midfield to be able to execute at a high level. These guys that we've had haven't been able to do that. And so this is really important to see that we get new guys in that can run Brent Venables' system. The sooner the better. In a lot of ways, it's tough to see guys go. It's tough to see you thin out. But if you can replace them, and with the portal, it's a different world. If this were 7 or 8 years ago, you'd be really hurting for trying to, and that's why coaches used to get 3 or 4 years.
I mean, that was the old saying, right? We got to let him
get his
guys in there, because it took 3 full recruiting classes to get rid of the old regime, and where most of the 2 deep are the kids that you went after.
And that
whether it
you
fit your
developed.
style,
Yeah.
whether it was personality or work ethic, or if you were a height, speed, weight kind of guy, or whatever
Which
it was.
we are all those things.
You had your system in place of how you selected players. And yeah, it would take you 3-4 years to get that done. And now, as you just mentioned, after 2 cycles, you're going to have a lot of your roster turned over.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, a significant number.
No, it's a 2-year. You're 2 years in, and you've got just about everything that you need in terms of
And the only people that aren't
proving what you can do.
are the 3-year starters, kids that you're not
Right.
going to process.
Which is fine. Yeah, you want those guys. Well, I want to talk about one other thing. It was the poll this week, which is the best team, that is the least bad team, in the playoff to win the national title from a strategic standpoint from Oklahoma. So we've got 4 teams obviously in the playoff. One of them is going to win the national title. My question was getting at if we could just push a magic button to choose which one. And you guys may be hearing Oscar in the background. I don't know what he's making some noise. He has a lot to share. He's got a favorite team in the national title. Is it Bulldogs? You like dogs? Yeah. So who should OU be rooting for? If we could push the magic button, who do we want to win from the standpoint of just who would be least bad for OU? What do you guys say about that? How'd you answer that poll?
I said Michigan. I say Michigan for a multitude of reasons. I feel like we are in the least battles with them recruiting-wise. So it's a newer up-and-coming team as well, something that's not as established as maybe an Ohio State or a Georgia, and then we're not in direct competition with these Texas kids like we would be with TCU. So I said Michigan, kind of a new blood.
What'd you say, Jay?
New blood, blue blood.
I actually said Georgia for almost the same lines as they won it last year. Georgia is who they are. I don't think back-to-back national championships for Georgia affects our recruiting battles with them any. So,
Well,
TCU is the obvious choice. That's the worst. I mean, you cannot have a Texas school in the Dallas-Fort Worth area win a
I
national
don't
championship.
know if that's so true, but
I think that'd be terrible.
So let me say, in my heart, I've got my where my heart goes on this, and then also where I go. Before that, the poll results themselves correctly 0% for Ohio State. Next was Georgia at 18%, then Michigan at 29%, and then TCU at 53%. So my heart is I want to see TCU win. Nothing to do with the question about strategicness for
Wait,
OU.
53% of the people thought it
Think
would be a
that-
good idea for TCU to win?
Yes, 53%. So, my first instinct would be that's the case because I don't feel like. But then I think about it, and Michigan to me is the no doubt about it the obvious choice there. I agree with you, Connor. I think they're the one that we have the least to lose with. Thinking about the Texas element that you bring up, Jay, and I think that's very real. That there's a marginal kid or two that you're going to compete with. You don't want to be competing against TCU. There's more competition there at homegrown with TCU than it is with Michigan. I don't know if we're going to go head-to-head. I mean, if we go head-to-head against Michigan for somebody, it's going to be real rare. Ohio State is more of an established school. We truly, as I look at it, and we've talked before about when I've run the analytics, we're truly competing with Ohio State and Alabama for who is in the top echelon of football in the last 30 years. And so I don't want them to get anything that helps their case. Georgia, I feel like we go up against them a lot more than Michigan. That's why I give Michigan the vote. I'd rather Michigan win than Georgia, because if Georgia wins, it's just one more feather in their cap, and we go up against them a lot, I feel like. You don't think as much?
They've been so dominant. It's
well,
not
yeah,
gonna
we need to
change.
knock them down. I don't want them to be that
But
dominant
I don't
anymore.
think they're actually gaining anything by it in a weird way.
Maybe
They're
not
almost
a lot.
just maintaining
Yeah.
who Georgia is.
Well, I mean, you've got one thing on your side is a diminishing marginal returns type of argument. You say it's just what else can you gain by
Right.
one more national title? Whereas Michigan hasn't achieved one, and if Michigan
Would
were
be
to
huge.
achieve one, it'd be a big, big deal.
Yeah, Ohio State.
Just like at TCU, it'd be a big, big deal.
Ohio State's been a little while now too.
It has been a while, yeah, and more so than Georgia, obviously. So
2014. is not
you've
that
got
long.
you've got that, but that Georgia versus Michigan, you've got that for sure. So I'll give you that. There's a point to be made there. I was thinking of one other thing that would potentially aid your case, but interestingly, the team that I would want to root for the most, I do think strategically might be the worst, and that's TCU.
I would agree.
I think TCU is pretty bad, even worse than Ohio State. And
I
as
think
much
TCU
as I
has
don't
a
want
great
Ohio
chance
State
of
to
making that
win,
game too.
oh sure
I
they
do too.
Against
Sure they do.
Michigan.
Yeah, the national media does not seem to think that they'll be able to handle the physicality of Michigan or something, but
They may
It
get
makes no
real
sense to me.
surprised by that, and Michigan might get real surprised
Yes.
by that. In fact, as we looked at the Big Ten in general, Michigan and Ohio State may get real surprised by the level of football that they play at versus these other programs. To the degree that TCU and of course Georgia are a proxy for that, Georgia is going to give anybody all they could possibly want. So I don't know. I think that there's no super obvious choice. Like if a Washington were in it, I think Washington would be the super obvious. That's fine. Let them win it.
Michigan
But-
State or
Yeah, Michigan State even. But a Michigan, that's a top program. They could all of a sudden, by winning it, get elevated a little bit. But I still think Michigan's the pick for me if I have to push the button. Georgia, here's what I was thinking of. If you want to give another reason to support Georgia, they're in what's going to be our conference. And so to the degree that that's beneficial, it's better to have a team in your conference of the future winning a national title and bringing glory to your conference versus a team
That
from
you're
the conference you're leaving
Yeah.
winning the national title,
Right.
or an adjacent conference like the Big Ten. So I don't know. It'll be tough. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. I don't want Ohio State to win no matter what. That'd be good, but that's kind of personal reasons as well as everything else. And people I
Ryan
know.
Day is absolutely Lincoln Riley.
You think so?
They are the same coach with the same type of deficiencies, I think.
I think you're right. I think you're probably right.
Ohio State's got better resources than Lincoln has had.
Right. Oh yeah, by
Um,
far. Bigger program, bigger
bigger reach.
endowment.
And
Yeah.
Ryan
If
Day
you will.
actually did do something, and he went out and got a really good defensive coordinator. And he knew he needed one. It
Yeah,
didn't
he-
pan out
Yeah.
yet.
No, you're right.
But
He recognized
if
something.
the Ohio State guys start to pick it up the way the Oklahoma State defenders picked it up,
Right.
well, then Ohio State could be a big, big problem.
Right. And somebody's going to be a big, big problem. But, Ryan Day with his Just for Men setup going on. I mean, it's hard to take him completely serious to me. But then again, I've always been a detractor. I thought that Urban Meyer is a really good coach, but I think he's a sleazeball. But beyond that, I think he got really lucky. I think his sleazeballiness helped him out a lot. He's a few key players or key plays away from not winning a couple national titles that he did. He shouldn't even been in it potentially in 2014, and he probably shouldn't have won against Oklahoma when he was at Florida. So you look at Jim Tressel before that. I always thought that he was a beneficiary of a really soft schedule, soft non-conference schedule, as well as the Big Ten was kind of soft and slow at the time. So it's easy for me to fall into that same trap, and I don't mean it necessarily that I disagree, but just to think that Ryan Day has not got what it takes, and maybe he doesn't. A lot of Ohio State fans are already saying that he doesn't got what it takes, and if you watch Message Board Geniuses, they're all over. There's a few people all over the anger and think that they need to make some changes there. So I don't know.
Does C.J. Stroud have one more year?
Probably, but he's going to the draft.
He's going to the draft.
I
I
would
think
think
he would
so.
go
So
to the draft.
I think that's a precipice
That's
for
telling.
Ryan Day next year. Can he
do it?
Can he produce something with
Who is his guy? Who's the backup at this point?
No
would have
idea.
been Quinn Ewers.
Would have
Right.
been Ewers. So
He
yeah,
took
no
his
clue.
$1 million from the donors and ran. And who knows how good he actually is.
We don't have to talk about it now, but one thing I've thought about with the portal is I don't think anyone's going to have a sufficient backup from here on out.
I don't know about that. It just depends on the situation. So
If you're good enough to be the backup quarterback, just not quite the starter, but good enough to be a solid backup quarterback at OU, Alabama, somewhere else, unless that player is only 1 year ahead of you and they're for sure gone, you're not keeping that kid. He can go play at 90 other schools.
But
We've
it always
become pretty
was
numb
that
to
way.
it.
It always was that way. It was just one step removed.
No,
Yeah.
the kids didn't though. But they didn't.
But no, they surely did. You didn't have. It's very rare to have
That's
a program that replaced a guy with a guy. Almost always there was a drop off. It was rare to have. I mean, the OU situation with Baker and Kyler was rare. The old Miami days were rare. That you'd have these great quarterbacks replacing great quarterbacks, and even then there sometimes was a gap. I think that the trick is potentially that you have to stagger it a little bit smarter.
I guess my point is, you've always had serviceable backups
I think you still
for
will.
when quarterbacks get hurt, or if they decide to leave early, or something else. I think teams are going to have to scramble a lot more often now to go get a quarterback.
I think it changed. Well, I think there's a couple different things you got to think about here. One is the landscape's changed, so you got to adapt to how the new setup is. And so one thing you can do is stagger it, and you can say,
which Lincoln did,
to a degree.
but it also screws you.
Well, yeah,
As
you
soon
got to
as
be
one
careful.
doesn't-
I don't know if he's got the formula down.
As soon as one isn't as good as you think they were, and you
Right.
staggered, well, now you're 2 years behind.
But not
Right?
necessarily, because that's the
Because
second
of
piece
portal.
I'm going to bring in, because of the portal.
Right.
So what you can do is you can stagger guys, and you can say, look, you can come in, and so let's say Jackson Arnold's amazing. Well, they can recruit another quarterback to say, look, Jackson Arnold is not going to be here for 4 years. So you're coming in, you're going to learn, and then all of a sudden the job is yours, and you've got 2 years, maybe 3, at the top of the game.
But what I'm saying is we're not going to get an elite 2023 quarterback.
You probably won't.
If you do, and if you
but
do,
I don't think you almost ever
they're
would.
not gonna
He'll
stay.
transfer.
But they
What's that?
almost never did. You almost never got back-to-back elite quarterbacks. It was very rare that a program was able to replace an elite quarterback or recruit an elite quarterback right behind a guy who just had a great, I mean, what are you looking at, a great freshman year? You're assuming Jackson Arnold's going to have a great freshman year, or that you have a guy who is promising to do a lot?
No, you're going to see a 23 kid commit, even if Jackson Arnold doesn't get on the field very much next year.
Let's say
When
that
the
he only
kid-
gets on the field 4
But
times.
when the kid comes in early, enrolls
Right.
early, and he'll be battling Jackson Arnold in that spring, he'll see where he stands on that pecking chart, and that kid will be here for that season. That's it, because he's going to see
Maybe,
Jackson Arnold
maybe
run
not.
with it.
And so as a coach, you got to appreciate that and understand you're going to do it, or understand that you got to go replace him with someone else in the portal that had a similar experience somewhere else, or and you may not need a guy. But I mean, it's always been the case that if the star quarterback goes down, your season might be toast. It's nothing that new about the portal
No.
that created that situation. What I think it's a little bit different is you got to think strategically about, one, how do you recruit guys and what story are you telling them? And most of the time the story is a legitimate, look, you're not coming in as a freshman and playing at the University of Oklahoma. Who do you think this is, Tulsa? You're going to have to earn your spot, and you're going to have to learn our system and grow. And as a sophomore, you may come in, or a junior. And at the same time, you have to strategically use the portal to say, we got to go find a kid who can fill that spot and be that kid who wants to, A, play for a team that's competing for championships, even in a backup role, and potentially be the guy off the bench who plays, who knows, all right, what are my options? I can go to OU and potentially win a ring or two, win a conference ring and maybe competing for a title, or I can go start at Tulsa.
I think-
who the hell cares about Tulsa?
I think quarterbacks coming out of high school now are so much more advanced than they were 10 years ago coming out of high school.
I think it's
I think
just
it's not even
startling.
close.
I think it's just startling this year because we had every single quarterback on our roster was a new name outside of Ralph Rucker. And we were running a completely new system. We're not usually you are going to have a foundational guy who, like you said earlier, is going to be a backup. Maybe not be the star guy. He may be a Nate Hibble or something similar to that, but will be more serviceable than what we saw with a Davis Bevel. I think it was massively startling for us.
And it's a red flag that Davis Bevel and
Right.
whatever these other guys
And
couldn't
I think it
produce
was massive.
is
It was
another
just a big
issue.
startling thing when we see our star quarterback goes down. You expect more than what you saw with the University of Oklahoma. With the quarterback, that
Everyone
we
should
threw out
expect
there,
more
right?
than that. That's
exactly.
a
So,
real
I mean,
rarity.
You don't get that massive
Max
just
Duggan
gut punch,
Didn't even win the starting job this year for TCU.
and
And he's going to New York.
Which kind of is counter to your point.
maybe
a
an
little bit.
exception. Maybe an exception to.
But I don't know. I
the
think it's
rule.
kind of counter to Jay's point. I think that means that there were two guys that were right there. Then again, it's a weird program and a weird year. I do think you're right about guys
But
coming
I'm
out
saying
of high
Max
school.
Duggan would have, if I forgot his name,
Chandler Morris.
Chandler Morris.
Right.
Okay.
If he
Stayed
would've done
healthy
well.
and took TCU to the same spot
Sure.
that they're at now,
Sure, he would have.
and he's got another year. Duggan's gone.
Right. True. And
He's
that
gone.
still might have happened in the old world. It is different in the new world where you can transfer it immediately. Yes, it definitely increases the volatility of that. But at the same time, I don't think it's to go all the way to the idea that you'll never have a backup guy. I mean, you'll never have a backup guy that can step in and be as good as your starter. They're in a weird spot in TCU that they theoretically had two guys. But that's like saying back in the days when Bradford was competing for a starting job that we had two guys that were equal. We didn't.
Well, it's
We
like
had Bradford and who I can't even remember his name. Who was the guy that was nearly beating Bradford out for the job?
Drew Allen.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
I think that's his name.
Regardless, it doesn't matter. It's like it was coach speak nonsense or coach ignorance that they couldn't figure out who was the better guy.
But it's like Michigan was in a similar spot as TCU, right? Michigan has this older upperclassman quarterback who took them to the promised land last year.
They both played a game
They
and a half
both played
earlier.
last year, and then but everyone knew this J.J. McCarthy kid was the guy that's going to play, and now you see the upperclassman who was a more than serviceable second string guy will be transferring out, and you will get
And that's gonna happen.
and you
I
will get
agree.
the common. You will get the common. Our backup is not going to be nearly as good as what the product in our first team is going to be because first team quarterbacks who are playing at the Power 5 level are going to be on the field if they are of that caliber, right? So, I mean,
So I think a smart coach is going to have to understand. This is back to our conversation with a Gundy versus a Deion Sanders or something. A smart coach is going to have to understand it's not the same game where you get to own and control a player the way you used to, where you could sign a guy, make some crazy promises, and his cost of leaving was so much higher. His cost of leaving is lower, so you're going to either have to make good on it or realize, this guy's going to leave, and I got to go find another guy in the portal who is something comparable to that, who's in a situation he doesn't want to be in. There are guys who will want to do that. There are guys who want to say, I would rather be the backup at Oklahoma than be the starter at Tulsa, or name a school that is just not that impressive and not that interesting. And I say, Tulsa, pick on a school that looks like they're going to be 6-6 or worse, or not even go to a bowl game. He's got talent. He'd rather be the backup at Oklahoma and have a chance and know if a guy gets injured. A smart coach is going to have to realize, I got to go find that guy.
Look at Clemson.
Yeah.
And
Clemson will have no backup for next year,
Short of a portal guy coming in.
short of a portal guy. But and that's they're going to have to roll with their
the
freshman quarterback and just.
But I mean, and that's the risk you need to run. Is if you're Jeff Lebby and you're Brent Venables right now, and you're talking to Jackson Arnold, and you're saying, look, we want you to spend a year in the system. We're going to give you a shot at the starting job. There's nothing guaranteed, but regardless, if you don't get it, we want you to spend a year in the system, and you
Right.
are our guy year 2, and you work it, and that's why you do have that staggering effect, I think. And maybe Lincoln had it worked out to a way where we were nervous because we had a guy coming in every 2 years where, like, Spencer was going to be there for an extended period of time, where we could have lost Caleb had it been if Spencer stays this year and Lincoln ends up
Which is
staying.
really a bad scenario for
Yeah,
us at the time, because
exactly.
we're expecting that Spencer is good enough. He's going
Turning it
early
over,
to the
going to
pro,
the draft.
and
Exactly.
that Caleb's coming in. Worst case scenario is he's only good enough to still be the starter, not good enough to go to the pros, and now you're going to lose the backup, which is the situation a lot of teams will be in from time to time when a guy doesn't pan out.
Which is why I'd much rather have those cutthroat conversations to tell Dylan Gabriel, you
But
might
also
have
those
a fifth
cutthroat
year.
decisions.
Yeah.
Mid-season it shouldn't take the fans to tell Lincoln to play Caleb.
we want Caleb,
It should
yeah.
be Lincoln saying, I need to play Caleb and get him in there. Who knows? Maybe he had already taken the USC job in his mind, so it didn't matter. But at the time, he needed to be thinking about what he needed to do, and he needed to think, I need to make a decision right here. And he needed to forego the sunk cost. I think he had the huge sunk cost fallacy that he thought, this is my guy, Spencer Rattler's it. I'm not going to reject my own thinking from before, despite all the evidence in front of me. I'm going with Spencer until it just was absolutely obvious and had to be that he had to make a change.
And that's where Dabo messed up this year with his quarterback situation, is when he brings the freshman quarterback in to come back.
Does
and
well,
to
wins the game.
Wins the game against Syracuse, and then chooses to sit him the next week in place of DJ Uiagalelei.
Yep, they would be in the playoffs.
They would be in the playoff, and Dabo would be heralded as this, man, I'm glad we made that decision.
And what's weird is he did that with old Pretty Boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kelly.
No, the
Plays
for
Jacksonville.
Jaguars.
Yeah.
No, I know, but he
Oh,
put in Trevor
he
Lawrence
took
and
out Kelly.
took
Yeah.
out the Kelly.
Yeah.
kid.
Kelly,
Trevor
Yeah.
Lawrence. That's what he
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, exactly. He was cutthroat in that decision, and he was waiting for an opportunity.
And
to
so it's
put
strange
in.
that he didn't do it again.
It is
Exactly.
strange.
It is odd. So
It is.
I don't know.
It is weird.
It's
Well,
a weird
it's a
time we're
different
living in.
world.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
And we all, in a weird way, secretly hope it's just like that for us next year.
Yes, we do. So that's definitely.
Except I hope it's game one. I hope
we
it's not
need
game
we
4.
need to talk about this in an off season, but before the spring when things are more obvious
And he's
to
signed.
make some
He's not even
predictions.
our quarterback
He's got to sign, and to see where we think we are on this, because I gave some guys at work a hard time, and I stand by it, that it would be phenomenal if from day one a true freshman replaced a seasoned starter with the track record that Dylan Gabriel has. But by God, I think it's a possibility. And I definitely think it's a possibility it happens sometime within the season. But if it's going to happen within the season, what the hell's stopping you from doing it from game one? And wouldn't you be in a better position from game one? Of course, it depends on what kind of spring they have. It depends on what kind of fall camp they have. So that's something for a future pod to be talking about and arguing about who we think the starting quarterback should be.
DG versus Jackson Arnold in the red-white game.
It's going to be really, really interesting.
pretty fun.
And it's going to maybe be a telling thing about Jeff Lebby.
Yep.
And that's something that we're definitely going to be talking about coming up soon. But until then, we're going to come back next week. We're going to have Locks of the Week with an update on where we stand on that. magnificent prognostication.
Talk about Caleb winning the
We're talking about
Heisman.
Caleb winning the Heisman. We're going to talk about bowl games
Army,
and
Navy,
our
baby.
locks. We got
Army,
Army
Navy
Navy
game.
coming up this week, and then we're going deep into bowl season. But until then, Boomer.
Sooner.